Hey everyone. In this video, I'm going to explain the rubric for major essay project number 1. So the rubric, this is what I will use to assess your polished drafts of major essay project number 1. Okay, so as mentioned in the syllabus and the grading and assessment policy or breakdown, the polished drafts will be assessed using a 0 to 4 scale, and each of those numbers, they're not points. Remember, they're not points. They're just numbers that represent these different characters. Okay, so a 4 represents this characteristic, exceeds minimum standards. It doesn't mean 4 points, it just means exceeds minimum standards, a 4. A 3 means that the minimum standards have been met. A 2 means that the minimum standards have not been met. A 1 means that the standards have, usually they just haven't been even attempted, and so they drastically fall short from being met. And then a 0, that just means that there's nothing there for me to look at. There's no submission, so the student didn't submit the essay, so I can't look at it, I can't assess it. So again, these are not points. They're just numbers that represent these characteristics, okay? So just something important to keep in mind, any essay that has not met the minimum standard for 5 or more criteria and or does not meet the minimum page length will be assessed as a 2 until the writer revises the essay to address the indicated concerns. So each of the criteria are here. So we got cover letter, title, introduction, focus, on down the line. So if 5 or more of these criteria are not met, meaning that there's a 2 or lower, then overall the entire essay will be assessed as a 2, which means that overall the entire essay does not meet the minimum standards, and so therefore that student will need to revise it so that they do meet those minimum standards. Now, anybody has the ability to submit a revision. So even if a student, if their draft is a 3 overall, they still have the ability to revise it to try to exceed the minimum standards, to try to make it a 4, for example. Okay, so just want to keep that in mind. Everybody has the ability to revise, but if the essay overall is assessed as a 2, then that student will need to submit a revision in order to at least meet the minimum standards. Okay, now also if, as it says here, if, say for example, every single criteria, all the criteria are met, except the page length, if it doesn't reach the minimum page length. So major essay project 4, your polished draft needs to be a minimum of 4 full pages in length. So if a student submits an essay that's only 3 full pages, for example, even if they every other criterion was excellent, they still need to submit a revision so that they at least meet that minimum page count. Okay, so just want to give those caveats at the top here. So the cover letter. So with your draft 1 of major essay project 1, you submit that feedback letter, which gives me a heads up on what you wanted me to pay attention to with my feedback. So the cover letter for the polished draft is similar. What you're doing is you're explaining how you took that feedback that I gave you on your first draft and applied it to creating your polished draft. What did you think you did well? What do you think you still need to work on? Any questions that you might have? So that is the first criterion. We need to make sure that we submit a cover letter that addresses the cover letter prompt, which you can find in the module. Title. So this is the second category here. So we want to make sure that the essay has a creative title that artfully alludes to the essay's main focus. And it's not just simply titled essay or MEP or something similar. So we want to make sure that we're creating a title that artfully alludes to the essay's focus. Be creative in your title, so that's something to pay attention to. Next criterion here, your introduction. Introduction is well developed, engaging, and inventive. Most likely a key anecdote or example used to transition into the major themes of the essay. So remember, we want to make sure that we're not relying on simple or unoriginal conventions that we learned from the 5-paragraph essay structure. So for major essay project number 1, we want to make sure that we're beginning with a key anecdote or example that we will then use to transition into talking about the major themes that we're wishing to explore in the essay. So we want to pay attention to that. This next criterion, focus. So these are the characteristics for this. The essay's focus is clearly defined and supported throughout. The essay asks a genuine question or poses a genuine problem. The essay shows the writer's mind at work on a problem. So these two quotations come from Habits of the Creative Mind. But essentially what this means for the focus, we want to make sure that we are adhering to the prompt for major essay project number 1. You're actually accomplishing what we're challenged to do in the prompt. So paying attention to that. Now, if we are addressing the prompt, then chances are we will be asking a genuine question or posing a genuine problem. The genuine problem here is to see how these experiences from our past with reading and writing have influenced who we are today as readers and writers. So if we're accomplishing that, then we're posing that genuine problem. And then the same if we're actually trying to work through these things and we're exploring ideas and we're not shying away from the gray areas, and then we're showing our readers our mind at work on this problem, trying to put these pieces together. The prompt, so the characteristics for this, the essay fully addresses the prompt for this major essay project. So again, make sure that you go back to the prompt for major essay project 1 and you've accomplished those things that the prompt is asking of us. The essay reaches the minimum page length. So how many pages does our polished draft need to be? It says in the prompt. You want to go back to that. And the same for the minimum number of paragraphs. How many paragraphs do we need to have at a minimum? Go back to the prompt. It says that there. So we need to have at least that amount. We can have more. We just can't have fewer. Next category, the conclusion. So the characteristics for this category are here. The conclusion addresses the so what question, enabling the reader to understand the significance of the essay's main focus. The conclusion bookends the essay by returning to an idea or example brought up earlier in the essay to create a satisfying full circle effect. The essay is not just a summary of the essay's main points. Remember, that's a carryover of the 5-paragraph essay structure. We're moving beyond that. And the essay and the conclusion does not begin with the phrase "in conclusion" or something similar. That's kind of corny, okay? That's more appropriate in a speech. You know, you tell your reader, you tell your audience, "Here's my conclusion." But in an essay, that should be apparent. If you're addressing the so what question, if you're creating that satisfying bookend, it should be apparent to your readers that that's the conclusion. You don't need to announce it. Structure and organization. So these are the characteristics for this category. Points are organized in a logical manner, no gaps in logic. So it's just clear to the readers how one idea leads into the next. The essay structure is purposeful and helps create a rewarding experience for readers. So making sure that the way that you've organized your ideas is intentional, you've thought carefully about it, you've done it with purpose. It's not just all haphazardly thrown in there. Points are treated as a unified progression of ideas, not as separate, disconnected items in a list. Remember, we want to avoid what we call the listing effect. So think of each point in your essay as a single link in a bigger chain of meaning. Every link in that chain is connected to the one that comes before and connected to the one that comes after. So think of your points in that same way. Writer displays a strong consideration of effective and creative organization techniques, perhaps learned from On Structure. So in Habits of the Creative Mind, that essay is on page 195 through 203. So we'll be reading that in week 4. But in that section, Miller and Jurecic, the authors of Habits of the Creative Mind, they talk about different strategies for creating an effective structure or organization for our essays. So we want to make sure that we're not just kind of, either not thinking about our organization or avoiding that sort of straightforward, kind of overly simplistic chronological order where you're basically just going through your experience in school from, first grade all the way to 12th grade. Try to avoid doing that. I recommend organizing in the order of significance. So if you had a more significant experience earlier in your life, you might save that till later in your essay, even though it came earlier in your life, if that makes sense. Paragraphs. So these are the characteristics for this category. Purposeful and well-developed paragraphs. So that means that each paragraph is designed with a purpose. It has a specific point or perspective or idea that you're trying to accomplish. And it's well developed, so you fully explored or explained that idea. Paragraphs are used to separate ideas effectively. Make sure that you use paragraphs. They are important, even though we're not writing a 5-paragraph essay. And then make sure that your paragraphs are of a manageable length. Okay, so no overly lengthy paragraphs. If you have a paragraph that spans a whole page or even more than a page, that's a good indication that you can split that paragraph into multiple smaller paragraphs. So try to do that, figure out a nice place to break that bigger paragraph up. We want to avoid having super long paragraphs. Transitions, or as I like to call them, bridges. So these are the characteristics for this criterion here. The writer effectively builds bridges among ideas to demonstrate their connections. So thinking about how an idea in one paragraph, what's a detail in that paragraph that can lead into your discussion of the next idea in the following paragraph. Not only do we need to consider this idea that I just talked about, but we also need to consider this next point that I'm about to talk about. You wouldn't actually write it that way, but that's the kind of idea. You're showing how these things are connected. Make sure that you are not relying on simple transitional words or phrases to serve as your transitions between ideas. So if you're kind of using these simple transitional words or phrases, first, second, third, additionally, furthermore, moreover, those can, obviously they have an important role to play, but that's not what the transition is. So if you're only thinking of your transition as just that simple word or phrase, that's just a little too simplistic. We want to think of the transition as a bridge you're building. You're showing the connection among ideas. So try to avoid just relying on those simple words or phrases as your transitions. Think of your transitions more, like I said, as those bridges. So full-on sentences that show the link between one idea and the one that comes next. And then all of that hopefully will help you avoid that listing effect. So not treating your points as just disconnected items in a list. Next criterion here, connections. So the writer draws insightful, compelling, and original connections among ideas and observations. Insightful means that you are providing some sort of key idea or explanation that illuminates an idea or explains an idea for your readers. Compelling means that it's interesting. And then original means that it's not something that we've already heard before 100 times, right? So original meaning that it's particular to you, it's unique to you in that way. These experiences are from your life, not just kind of a general, theoretical, generic life. And then make sure that you have thoroughly explained the point's significance. How and why do these things mean what you say they mean, okay? Don't just assume that your reader's going to understand what it means. We only have what's on the page, so it's up to you to provide us with that explanation. So thoroughly explain the significance of these ideas. Why do they matter? How do they connect to the other points that you've explored? Next criterion here, examples and source material. So the writer uses relevant examples from their own experience. So from your own experiences with reading and writing up until this point, make sure that you're using relevant examples from your experience. Writer uses any source material in thought-provoking ways. What that means is that if you are building in any kind of quotations from outside sources or from other sources, that they actually serve a purpose. They're not just thrown in there just because, right? it should serve a purpose. It should provoke thought. It should help to develop the ideas further for your readers. And examples in source material advance and complicate the writer's thinking. So in writing, it's actually good to complicate your thinking. That's actually a good thing. In our day-to-day lives, we don't like things to be complicated. But in our academic writing, to complicate an idea, to complicate your thinking, means that you are exploring all the nuance of it. You're actually honoring the complexity of those ideas. You're not just oversimplifying things. And then if applicable, so this won't be applicable for everybody. This only applies if you do build in quotations into your essay. Make sure that you've integrated the quotations effectively, so there's a clear distinction between the words and ideas of the writer and the source material, so your reader shouldn't be left guessing, what ideas are yours and what ideas are from the outside source. Context and background information is provided for your quotation, so you're actually kind of explaining the quotation a little bit. You're introducing them with signal phrases. So-and-so states, according to so-and-so, as so-and-so puts it, right? Signal phrases help to introduce quotations to your readers. And then you'll want to properly cite it in MLA format if you do build in quotations to this essay project. So not everybody's going to do that, but if you do, that's the characteristic there. Tone and diction. So vibe and word choice, in other words. Your ideas are presented in a way to engage smart, attentive readers. So imagine that your readers are smart people. They have complex, beautiful, smart brains, and they are attentive, meaning that they pay attention to details, okay? So make sure that you're presenting your ideas in such a way that will engage smart, attentive readers. Your credibility as a writer is meticulously crafted through your tone and word choice. So your credibility is how trustworthy you are as a writer. Do your readers actually care what you have to say, for example? Do they believe what you have to say? Are you presenting your ideas in such a way where you're being respectful of your audience? All of those things are important to help build your credibility, and so you need to meticulously craft it. So paying close attention to the vibe that you create and the word choice that you use. Make sure that you elevate your tone above the conversational level. We're not just talking here. We're writing, and we're writing in an academic setting, and so we need to make sure that we are meeting those expectations as best we can so that our readers are going to find us credible as writers. So we're not just typing like we're talking. You're not just shooting off a quick informal email to your best friend. That's not what we're doing here. So we need to make sure that we're crafting our sentences in such a way where it's elevated above the conversational level. So no instances of overly conversational, informal, or casual language. So not relying on slang, not relying on text speak. If you're going to say going to, don't say gonna. That's text speak. That's fine in conversation, but in an academic setting, gonna just ain't gonna cut it, right? So you need to spell things out like that. Any instances of first-person perspective are purposeful and help develop the essay's focus. So I'm not saying that you can't use first-person pronouns. Obviously, that would be really hard to do if in an essay where you're challenged to examine your own experiences. You can't use I? What? No, that's not what I'm saying at all. You can use I, but you want to use it very purposefully, okay? So if you can make a statement without inserting yourself into that statement, I would err on that side. Try to do that. Try to avoid inserting yourself into the statement if you can make it without it. So if you can state the idea without saying I, try to do that. But if you can't, just make sure that you're paying close attention to that. Language sophistication. So the characteristics for this criterion, the writer demonstrates a strong command of written English. So remember, this is written English. So paying close attention to how you're expressing your ideas in written form. Varied sentence structure. So that means that you're not relying on the same sentence structure over and over and over and over again, so all of your sentences sound the same. This is actually an issue with those of you who've been playing around with ChatGPT. This is how I can tell that it's written by a computer, is that all the sentences are the same structure. Stupid computers. You all are smart, beautiful human beings with smart, beautiful human brains. Use your human brain, okay? So just vary your sentence structure. And then your vocabulary is appropriate for this rhetorical situation. Again, I don't mean that you need to sound super smart. You don't need to look up big fancy words. I want you to use vocabulary that you're comfortable with, but just make sure that it's intentional vocabulary and it's vocabulary that is going to elevate your tone above the conversational level. Figurative language and rhetorical flourishes. So these are the spices that you're going to incorporate into your writing, the stuff that's going to make it interesting. So for this criterion, the writer makes use of metaphor, simile, analogy, symbolism, and or other forms of figurative language for rhetorical effect. So metaphor is when you're comparing something to something else. That's what an analogy is as well. Her smile was a beaming sun ray. Wow, that's very vivid. Ooh. Using things like that where you're kind of making these comparisons to other things, that's going to make writing really interesting. So I want you all to have fun. This is what makes writing fun, and not only to write, but also to read. So how are you going to express your ideas in unique and original ways by building in these figurative bits of language? So pay attention to that. Have fun with it. Writer includes small sensory and descriptive details throughout their essay. So I mentioned this in the guidelines video. And document Major Essay Project 1 guidelines. This is the stuff that's going to help your readers visualize your writing. So if you mention your one of your high school teachers, what color hair did that teacher have? Did they always wear glasses? Did they always wear a specific kind of jacket or something? Just a detail here, detail there, just kind of sprinkle them throughout. Those can really go a long way. The writer does not rely on simple or overused cliches. Cliches are these ready-made phrases that we use all the time, and we use them so often that they have been devoid of their original intent. One of my pet peeves, or one of the overused cliches that I just really hope that y'all move past and by the time we finish this class, is the phrase "think outside the box." God, we use that phrase all the time. It's such an overused cliche. Think outside the box. Just think outside the box. And what that means is we want to be original. We want to be unique. We want to try things that nobody else has tried. But we're using the same boring old phrase that everyone uses. So by using the phrase "think outside the box," we're not actually being original. So that's an example of a cliche, because it's been so overused it now doesn't have the original meaning anymore. So I want you really all to express yourself in ways that are unique to you. So if you're compelled to use a cliche, stop yourself and say, wait, what does that cliche mean? Is there a way that I can express that idea that's unique to me? Have fun. And then any rhetorical questions are used purposefully and sparingly, so not that often. So don't rely too much on questions. Don't pose questions to your readers, especially if they're direct questions. Just really questions in your writings, use them very, very sparingly. A well-placed question can do a lot, but if you use questions all the time and you're asking your readers all these questions, it's like, God, quit asking me questions. Am I under interrogation here? What? No, we don't want that. So use them very sparingly, if at all. All right, only a few more criteria here. So this next one, economy of language. This means how well all of your words are working together. And so for this category, we want to make sure that our ideas are stated clearly, precisely, and succinctly. So clearly just means that we're expressing an idea with clarity, so our readers can understand the idea. Precisely means that we are being deliberate with our word choice. We're using a specific word for a specific purpose. And then succinctly means that we're not using too many words to express an idea. So succinct, if something is expressed succinctly, it means it's nice and to the point. There's not a lot of words or a lot of fluff in there. It's nice and direct, nice and to the point. This doesn't mean that you need to use simple, short sentences. That's not what I mean. But that every word in that sentence has a clear job that it's performing. So the writer makes every word count. There's no fluff or filler just thrown in there to take up word counts or space. Why use 5 words when you can use only 1 word to express an idea? And I'll give you all an example. Due to the fact that. That's 5 words. Due to the fact that. Why use those 5 words when we can use 1 word? Because. Ooh, because, that word right there is a much better word for that job. I'm going to pay because to do that job versus those 5 other words. They're all wishy-washy and kind of leaning against the counter. They're not doing their job. They're not pulling their weight. Why am I paying those 5 words when I can pay that 1 word? To use a work analogy there. All right, spelling and grammar mechanics. Essay contains no major or distracting spelling, grammatical, or typographical errors. I want you all just to take pride in the work that you submit. So proofread multiple times, make sure that you're spelling words correctly, make sure that as much as you can that you're constructing grammatical sentences, and that it's not riddled with typos and misplaced punctuation marks and stuff that's kind of sloppy looking. Take pride in the work that you submit. Whether or not we like it, people judge us based on the work we produce. And so we want to be judged based on good examples of the hard work we put into things. So spelling, grammar, mechanics, just make sure that there are no major or distracting spelling, grammatical, or typographical errors. Turnitin similarity report. So when you submit your drafts, the Turnitin feature in Canvas will generate a similarity report. That means all of the content that is similar to other sources, it will flag it and mark it and find it on the internet. And so if it's higher than 25%, that means that just too much of that essay is not original to you. So we want to make sure that it's just lower than 25%. And then finally, MLA format. I understand that we are learning MLA format. Some of us are more familiar with MLA format than others. So over this semester, we'll be working on it. So by the time we finish this class successfully, we'll be pretty well versed in the basics of MLA format. But these are the things that I want us to strive for. So the writer has formatted the essay according to MLA guidelines with no errors. Pay attention to these things. 12-point Times New Roman font, double spaced. So double spaced, no extra spaces between any items. So that includes between paragraphs. You don't need to add extra spaces between paragraphs. Just the whole document is double spaced. And then 1-inch margins on all 4 sides. Top, bottom, left, right, only 1 inch. And then a proper heading and header. If you don't know what those things are, just do a quick Google search and you can figure that out. But just strive for that. That's something we'll be developing. And then if applicable, so those of you who build in outside sources for this essay, as I mentioned earlier, you'll need to create a works cited page for that. All right, y'all. Well, I know that this is a lot of information. If you have any questions about any of these categories, about any of the criteria listed on this rubric, let me know. Send me a message. You can use the inbox feature here on Canvas or send me an email at my email address. But I look forward to hearing from y'all if you do have any of those questions. But make sure that we are actually striving to accomplish these things. All these characteristics describe an essay with a 4 rating, so that's what we're striving for, okay? All right, y'all.